I truly believe that nobody is special. What I mean by that is, I don't think that there's any kind of talent or magic that people who are just good at things are born with. The people who make things look easy are able to do so because, in their minds, things really do look easy. Things look easy to them because they have a perspective that simplifies the task into something that requires less effort. It's less draining, and it frees up room in their mind for other things, including the task at hand. The act of driving a car at the limit is a subject flooded with information. Throttle technique, steering technique, slip angle, where to look, what line to take. It's all too much crap to be thinking about simultaneously while you're chucking a metal box down a road at 100 miles an hour. And that's not even taking into account when you've been fed misinformation. This is why I've obsessively theorized how to put the perfect driving perspective into words. When I was younger, I always thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could just download people's muscle memory? Well, I think what I've come up with just might be the closest we'll ever get to that in the real world, at least when it comes to driving. Enough hyping you up. I think it's time that I show you what I've been working on. Driving is an action that revolves around awareness. So I'm going to pinpoint what things you should be hyper-focusing on so that you can keep things as simple as possible and remain locked into a flow state as you drive. For all of the people who are extra skeptical about my approach, make sure to stay to the end of the video, because while my theories revolve around what's going on in your head, they also align with what happens in the real world, and I'll use that information to back up my claims. First, I'm going to start with the most obvious and most important thing: spatial awareness. I want you to imagine that your car is an X. An X with all 4 points of it attached to the tires of your car. Depending on what direction you are turning, this X will turn into one line. Let's say, for example, we're making a right-hand turn. In this case, we would focus on the line attached to our front left tire and our rear right tire. Understandably, you might be wondering why you would want to focus on that connecting line. The reason being is that in a right-hand turn, your front left tire and rear right tire, aka your outer front tire and inner rear tire, they make up the true space on the road that your car will occupy as it travels through the corner. Think about it. Every time your mom drives over a curb in her Toyota Highlander, it's the inner rear tire that's climbing up there. Most people never expect to hit a curb, but when they do, it's because they're not aware of the constantly changing space the entire wheelbase of their car takes on the road. If you're one of those people who can't stay in their lane on a mountain road, is afraid of driving in tight spaces, or feels as though you always turn in too early or too late, it's because you're lacking this kind of spatial awareness. Hopefully, now that you're aware of it, you can actively try to implement this into your driving. Now, understandably, you might be thinking, cool, I can navigate parking lots better. What does that have to do with driving fast? Well, I'm glad you asked, because the beauty of this perspective is that it simplifies so many driving concepts into only one thing you need to focus on, and it's that X. Let me explain. All cornering techniques revolve around your outer front tire and your inner rear tire in one way or another. We're told to brake hard in a straight line so that the braking force is distributed to both front tires. But when we turn in, that outer front tire is doing most of the work, hence why we're supposed to trail off the brakes as we turn, because that one tire can only take so much force before it loses traction. Now I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, I was told that driving at the limit is about extracting as much grip as possible from all 4 of my tires. And you're right, that statement is correct. But by simplifying our perspective down to the one most important tire, all of the other tires will have their grip extracted in the most efficient way possible, and I'm going to explain why. Let's go back to thinking about that X shape. When we're entering a corner, If we imagine ourselves as the line connected to our outer front and inner rear tire, we'll be aware of the weight being transferred to our outer front tire and off of our inner rear tire. This is what we want, because the weight is shifting onto our most important tire and off of our least important tire, that being the inner rear tire. You see, we actually want as little traction from the inner rear tire as possible during rotation, because that inner rear tire is actively fighting against what our outer front tire is doing. This is why cars have differentials, and why kart racers actively try to get their inner rear tire off the ground, since they don't have a differential. Extracting maximum corner entry speed is all about balancing that weight on the outer front tire without it losing traction and weight transferring back onto the inner rear tire. I'm not saying you should be three-wheel cornering every time you're behind the wheel. Not all cars are capable of it. But when a car can do it, you'll see the best drivers taking advantage of it. It's most commonly seen in grippy front-wheel drive touring cars due to their front-biased weight distribution. Now, some of you Initial D fans out there might be a little confused about what I'm saying. The inner rear wheel lift that some of you might be thinking of probably happens when lifting the inner front tire, like when Takumi would use the weight transfer to keep his inner front tire hovering above the gutter with no cover. I'm not here to call that anime fiction, because the truth is you do see that technique used a lot in the real world from rally drivers. What's important to realize though, is that technique is being done more towards the exit of the corner rather than at the entrance, and corner entry is where inner rear tire load should be lessened in order to help the car to rotate more easily. Another thing to realize is that in the anime, Takumi is full throttle as he lifts his inner front tire, which is what's transferring his weight so far to the rear that he can lift his inner front tire. Inner rear tire lift is all about the deceleration phase of the corner, which is all about braking and steering, and is not affected by engine output or drivetrain layout. At this point, I completely understand if the explanations I've given are causing even more questions to pop up in your head. While I do believe that the rest of the video will answer a lot of them, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments of the video and in the Discord. The more you interact with my content, the higher the chance that more people will see this video. And frankly, your unanswered questions could be what fuels my content. At this point, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, Tagi, you showed us how to maximize our usage of one tire during the corner entry phase, but what about everything else? Well, I'm glad you asked, because now we're going to go over how this X perspective is going to help us mid-corner and at corner exit. Remember how I said the inner rear tire was the least useful tire? Well, now that we're past the corner entry phase, it's about to become a lot more useful to us. The debate about grip versus drift is a debate that's been around forever. The only reason it's still around is because it's a stupid argument founded on misunderstood terminology. I'm considering making a separate video for that argument alone, but for now let's focus on what's really important. What's important is where our inner rear tire is facing as we transfer weight back onto it. Again, the beauty of the X perspective is that now you'll actually be aware of this and know when you're gaining useful rotation or wasting traction and losing valuable speed. Remember, when our inner rear tire is perpendicular to the direction our outer front tire is pointing, we want to take as much load off of it so that it's not fighting against us. As a result of this, that means we want our inner rear tire to bear more load the closer it gets to being parallel to our front tire. There's a lot of terminology people will throw around when talking about this effect. Some people refer to it as slip angle, some people call it a four-wheel drift, but none of that crap matters. What matters is that you're actively aware of what your tires are doing. Let me explain why we want our inner rear tire to increase in load as it points parallel to our outer front tire. After a strong and optimized corner entry, it's likely that our lightened rear tires will start to rotate as well, initiating oversteer. This is the moment in which our inner rear tire will no longer be fighting against our outer front tire, because its direction will start to become parallel to where our outer front tire is pointing. Now, you might be wondering, how much rotation is good rotation? Is this considered drifting? Does this mean drifting is faster? To which I will respond, you're missing the point. But the first question is valid. How much rotation is good rotation? Some people will get super scientific and argue that the correct amount of slip angle is based on the individual tire that you're using. But something tells me that there aren't any real drivers out there who are on track thinking, okay, I need to get my tires to precisely 11 degrees of slip angle in order to extract maximum cornering potential. Stop. Nobody thinks like that when they're driving at the limit. The truth is, every car has different limits, and it approaches those limits at different rates. That's why I'm going to give you this general rule of thumb to know if you're maximizing traction or simply wasting it. The closer you can get your inner rear tire to being parallel to your outer front tire without surpassing that angle, the faster you will be. A lot of people will call this neutral steer or a zero counter steer drift. But the truth is, not all cars can achieve this to the same degree, especially if they have downforce. All that's important is that the closer you can get your inner rear tire to being parallel with your outer front tire, the faster you will be. And that if you exceed an angle that's parallel to your outer front tire, then you will be losing speed. This is why a lot of the best drivers prefer to have a car that leans towards oversteering. The more control a driver has over a car's oversteer, the easier it is for them to get that inner rear tire close to parallel with the outer front tire without risk of exceeding that angle and losing speed. The more prone to understeer a car is, the harder the driver has to work to control their inner rear tire, and the more likely they are to exceed that parallel angle and need to make a correction which would lose them speed. Is it starting to make sense yet why I'm so determined to help people understand this X perspective? Neutral steer this, slip angle that, all of this needlessly complicated crap you don't have to think about, but can still be implemented subconsciously by just having this perspective from the inside of your car. I'm not gonna lie, good driving technique is almost being gatekept by the sheer amount of technical jargon that's being overused and incorrectly used. Technical speak and mechanical lingo are meant for the garage and the pit lane. Don't get me wrong, learning all of this stuff is extremely important, but the mind of a fast, calm, and unfazed driver needs to be focused and not overstimulated. Overthinking is the biggest trap a driver can fall into, because while we may think we're solving problems, what we're really doing is instilling doubt in ourselves and incorporating hesitation into our mindset. And I don't think there's anything that's slowed down a driver or gotten a driver killed more than hesitation. If you've made it this far into the video, I want to thank you, because your viewer retention is honestly the most valuable thing you can give me, since it helps the algorithms show this video to more people. Please, if you can, try out the X perspective in your simulator if you have one, or even your car. Heck, try it in any racing game. See if it works for you. And share your findings with me in the comments or the Discord. I want to see if I'm actually managing to help people. I'd also love to hear your suggestions on what I should cover next, or if there's any questions you feel need answering. One of those questions is probably going to be how the X perspective works in conjunction with racing lines, and all I have to say is that that is definitely a topic worthy of its own video. Hopefully this video was worth the wait. I'll see you all next time. Let's become better drivers together.